Factories are supposed to be places of life, humming with machines, footsteps, voices, the rhythm of production echoing through every corner. But what happens when that rhythm never stops, even when the people are gone? They say this factory died years ago, shut down after a fire claimed the lives of workers trapped inside. But when the night falls and the wind cuts through the broken windows, the machines start again. No electricity, no workers, no reason. Just the endless groaning of gears, the slam of presses, the steady hum of conveyor belts rolling with nothing to carry. I never believed it, not until I stepped through those rusted gates myself. The factory loomed like a skeleton against the horizon, its smokestacks blackened, its roof sagging with age. The walls were a patchwork of decay, brick crumbling, windows shattered, iron doors eaten through by rust. And yet, standing before it, I felt the faint vibration under my boots. A pulse. As though something inside was awake, breathing. The front gate was chained but hanging loose, as if someone had unlocked it and left it ajar. I pushed it open, the screech echoing through the empty lot. My flashlight cut through the dark, the beam catching broken pallets, bent steel pipes, and weeds pushing through cracked concrete. The silence outside was complete. No dogs barking, no cars, no sound but the crunch of my steps. But as soon as I crossed the threshold of the main doors, the silence broke. It was faint at first. A soft clicking, like gears turning somewhere deep within the building. I froze, thinking it was just water dripping, wind rattling old metal. But the sound grew steadier, more rhythmic. A pattern. A machine at work. The entrance hall smelled of ash and oil, a mix that clung to my throat. The floor was littered with papers turned to pulp, hard hats warped by fire, boots left behind as though workers had vanished mid-shift. The walls were scorched black, but in some places, handprints were burned into the paint, dark silhouettes where people had pressed against the wall during the fire. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and stepped deeper. The air grew heavier, thicker, as though the factory didn't want me there. To my left, a long corridor stretched toward the old offices, their glass windows shattered into teeth-like shards. To my right, the wide doors of the production floor stood partly open, and from beyond them came the sound again. That steady, mechanical groan. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but curiosity pulled me onward. I pushed the heavy doors open. The production floor sprawled before me, massive and endless. Tall machines lined the walls like rusted giants, conveyor belts snaked across the floor, and cranes hung from the ceiling like frozen predators. Dust coated everything, thick enough to mute my steps. But the machines, they weren't silent. A press in the corner jerked once, then again, its massive arms slamming down on empty space with a deafening clang. Sparks flew briefly, lighting up the shadows before fading into darkness. The sound reverberated through the hall, shaking my bones. I whispered to myself, there's no power here. The lines were cut, the generators long removed. I had seen them outside, gutted and useless. And yet, here it was, working. I moved closer, cautious, shining the light across the machines. A conveyor belt beside me shuddered, then began to roll, its black surface groaning under decades of rust. It carried nothing, but the belt squealed as it moved, screeching in protest like something alive and in pain. The smell changed. The air filled with the sharp tang of burnt oil, hot metal, and smoke, fresh and heavy as though the fire that ended this place had started again. My throat tightened, my eyes watered, but there was no flame. Just the phantom stench of work that should have been impossible. Somewhere above, a chain rattled. I lifted the flashlight just in time to see one of the cranes sway, its hook swinging lazily back and forth. Back and forth. A pendulum counting down time I didn't have. The floor creaked beneath me as I stepped further in. My beam caught glimpses, graffiti scrawled in red across walls. They never left. Don't wake them. Leave the machines alone. But every warning only pulled me deeper. That's when I heard it. Not just machines, not just gears. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Coming from somewhere in the maze of machines. I spun, the flashlight darting across conveyors, presses, looming silhouettes of rusted metal. Nothing. Just shadows too long, stretching too far, bending in ways they shouldn't. The footsteps stopped when I stopped, as though the factory itself was waiting. Then, without warning, all at once, the machines came alive. A dozen conveyor belts roared to life, their gears grinding. The presses slammed down, one after another, their clangs echoing like gunshots. The cranes above shuddered and lurched, hooks swinging wildly. The floor beneath me trembled, as though the entire building had awakened. I staggered back, the flashlight flickering in my hand. My ears rang with the chaos, my chest thundering with panic. And through the roar of machines, I heard it again, the footsteps. This time, faster, closer. I aimed the light toward the sound, and for just a second, I saw something between the machines. A figure, human in shape, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, its joints bending in unnatural angles. Its eyes gleamed like hot steel, glowing faintly in the dark. Then it was gone, swallowed by shadows and the grind of gears. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. The machines weren't just moving on their own. They were responding. To me. To something. As though the factory had become a living thing, every gear and belt part of one monstrous body. And I was inside it. The lights overhead flickered, one by one, casting everything in a sickly, stuttering glow. The walls groaned, the floor shook, and from the far end of the production hall came a sound that froze me where I stood. A voice. Low, metallic, drawn out, like words being dragged across steel. Don't leave. I staggered through the clattering chaos, my flashlight barely cutting through the shadows cast by towering machines that now seemed to move with intention. Conveyor belts groaned as they rolled, presses slammed down on empty space, and the smell of burning oil grew thicker, almost choking me. The factory was alive, and every gear, every piston, every hanging chain responded to my presence. I stumbled past a row of stamping machines, each one slamming down in a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. Sparks flew from a grinder nearby, illuminating a wall plastered with faded warning signs. Authorized personnel only, danger, high voltage, leave while you still can. But the writing wasn't fresh, it was carved into the metal, deep, desperate. Almost as if someone had been trying to warn me for decades. Footsteps. Again. But this time, they weren't slow. They were fast, circling me now, echoing off the steel beams and concrete walls. I whirled, flashlight swinging wildly, but the source was always just out of reach. Shadows flickered and danced across the walls, stretching and bending as though the building itself was mocking me. A conveyor belt jerked beneath my feet, rolling toward a massive hydraulic press. I leapt aside just in time as the press slammed down with a deafening clang. The force rattled the walls and sent dust and metal shards flying. My heart slammed against my ribs as the belt continued moving on its own, carrying nothing but scrap metal, yet somehow pushing me forward toward the deeper heart of the factory. I had no choice. I ran. The main production hall stretched farther than I could see, a labyrinth of rusted machines, hanging chains, and piles of discarded equipment. Every corner I turned, the machines followed. A crane above jerked violently, swinging its hook toward me. Sparks rained down as a saw blade suddenly spun to life, slicing the air where I had been standing just moments before. The footsteps grew louder, faster, synchronized with the machines now. It wasn't just the factory anymore, it was something else. Something thinking, waiting, hunting. I ducked into a narrow side corridor, the walls lined with lockers and old office doors. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, giving life to the shadows that slithered along the floor. I pressed against the wall, trying to catch my breath, but the shadows were moving too. One leapt across the corridor, its form tall, elongated, and wrong, bending angles no human should have. I stumbled into an office at the end of the hall. Papers were scattered across the floor, a typewriter still sitting on the desk, keys smashed. On the wall hung a blueprint of the factory, detailed and precise. But someone had scrolled over it in red, "They still work here." My stomach turned. From the office doorway, I heard it again, the footsteps. Behind me, then to the left, then above. I spun around, flashlight illuminating the desks, the filing cabinets empty. Yet the sound continued, surrounding me, pressing in from all sides. I knew I couldn't stay. I bolted back into the production hall, moving deeper into the heart of the factory. The floor here was cracked, puddles of stagnant water reflecting the stuttering light. Machines groaned louder, some moving without belts or motors, their mechanical arms swaying as if guided by invisible hands. A massive assembly line ahead started up, carrying nothing but rusted metal parts. They clicked together in perfect rhythm, assembling shapes that made no sense, gears fused with cogs, levers welded to pipes, all forming twisted mechanical mockeries of workers themselves. I froze. One of the figures moved, a limb jerking unnaturally, a metallic head turning toward me. I ran. The sound of pounding footsteps echoed behind me, faster now, blending with the clattering of presses and whirring of grinders. Sparks shot across the floor from a conveyor belt that had ignited somehow, and I dove aside as a flaming scrap metal sheet rolled past. The heat singed my arm, leaving a raw streak of pain. I reached the far end of the production hall and found a stairwell leading to the upper catwalk. The steps groaned beneath my weight, but I didn't stop. Above me, cranes swung wildly, gears turned of their own accord, presses slammed down rhythmically as though the factory itself was marking time, my time, counting down. On the catwalk, I could see the full scale of the hall below. Machines stretched as far as I could see, hundreds of them, all moving independently yet in harmony, like a living organism. Shadows darted between the machinery, forms humanoid yet impossible, bending and twisting as if the fire from decades ago hadn't destroyed them but transformed them. I paused, gasping for air. In the distance, a massive press slammed down on a conveyor belt, and from the crushing metal came a shape, something human-shaped but impossibly distorted. Its face was burnt and scarred, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The footsteps weren't behind me, they were with it. With them. A voice, metallic and hollow, whispered from everywhere at once. "You shouldn't be here, you shouldn't have come." I stumbled backward, nearly falling from the catwalk. The lights flickered, and for a brief second, I saw dozens of figures standing on the factory floor, watching me, moving in sync with the machines. Their faces were twisted, burned, stretched into mechanical nightmares, and their hands reached toward me, fingers grasping at the empty air. I ran down the catwalk and toward a maintenance door leading outside. The factory's chaos followed me. Conveyor belts shifted, cranes lurched, sparks flew, presses slammed. The footsteps merged with the mechanical roar into one deafening sound that made the walls shake. As I forced the door open, a final glance back revealed the full horror. The machines were endless, filling the factory like a tide of rusted steel. Between them moved dozens of humanoid figures, shadows with faces, with hands, with eyes burning faintly like molten metal. They didn't chase, they waited, patient and relentless, for anyone daring enough to disturb the factory's eternal work. I slammed the door behind me and bolted across the yard. The night air hit me like a wall, sharp and real, and I didn't stop until the factory was far behind. I didn't look back again. But even now, when the wind howls across abandoned lots or rattles old metal gates, I hear the faint echo of gears turning, presses slamming, and footsteps that will never stop. The maintenance door slammed shut behind me, but I knew the factory wasn't done with me. Every step I took across the cracked yard carried the weight of the endless machines still moving inside. Sparks flared from broken windows, metal groaned, and the echo of footsteps, my footsteps and theirs, thundered across the empty space. I thought I had escaped. I was wrong. The air grew heavier, electric, as if a storm had formed only over the factory. I glanced back. The shadows in the windows weren't just shadows, they were figures. Hundreds of them. Twisted, burned, humanoid but mechanical, staring with hollow eyes that reflected every light. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, yet synchronized with the machines I could no longer see. I ran, my legs screaming, my lungs burning, toward the only road leading out. But the earth beneath me shifted. A metallic clanging erupted from the factory gates. One by one, the gates started moving on their own, swinging open, then slamming shut, as though the building's metal skeleton had risen to block my escape. Footsteps. Always footsteps. Closer now, pounding the ground in unison with the rhythm of the presses and belts I could still hear inside. They weren't just behind me, they were all around me, circling, trapping. My heart raced so fast it felt like it would explode. Desperate, I leapt over a pile of debris. Sparks flew from a rusted crane overhead. I could see faint silhouettes among the machines in the shadows. Burnt faces, elongated limbs, eyes glowing faintly. They weren't trying to hide, they were waiting, patient predators ready to claim anyone who dared enter. I reached the far end of the yard, a narrow alley leading to a road. The gates were still moving, but I spotted a small gap, barely enough to slip through. I dashed. My arms scraped against metal and wood. My legs stumbled over broken pallets and twisted rebar. Behind me, the factory roared, a symphony of grinding metal, clanging presses, and ghostly footsteps. As I crossed the threshold of the gates, the world seemed to shift. The sounds of machines and footsteps didn't stop immediately. They followed me, echoing across the night. My ears rang with the rhythm, the factory's heartbeat pursuing me even from a distance. I stumbled onto the road, breathing hard, shaking, my body coated in grime and sweat. I dared a glance back. The factory loomed like a giant, dark beast, silent now, but I knew the silence was a lie. Every broken window, every rusted beam, every shadowy corner still contained life. Or what had once been life. The machines, the workers, the echoes, they would never rest. I ran until the first signs of civilization appeared. Streetlights, a distant car, the faint hum of electricity. For the first time, I felt the unnatural weight lift from my chest. But even now, when I lie in bed at night, I hear it. A faint whirring, a metallic groan, a soft, irregular echo of footsteps. Sometimes I think it's a dream. Other times, I think the factory is calling me back, waiting for the next visitor to disturb its endless work. Machines move on their own in that factory. Shadows walk among them. The past and the present are trapped together, working in rhythm, building endlessly, haunting endlessly. No one leaves untouched. No one escapes fully. And if you ever find yourself near an abandoned factory, listen carefully. When the wind carries the faint sound of clanging metal, when shadows twitch in the corner of your eye, remember, the machines never stop. The work is never left. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More abandoned places, haunted factories, and forgotten corners of the world await, where whispers never die and machines never rest.